My name is Elenn Steinberg, and I work with children with dyslexia in a variety of different ways. I tutor, I teach advocacy, I'm a mentor, I do legislative work, whatever I can do to support kids, because I think kids deserve to learn how to read, and I think dyslexic kids are amazing. What I'd like to say about dyslexia is it's a tremendous gift, because what happens when you're dyslexic is you get to think outside of the box. You learn differently. You see problems differently. The true, scientific answer is that the brain processes language differently. So a typical reader is going to be reading all on the left side of their brain. A dyslexic reader reads on the right side of their brain. So what I like to share with people is it's like driving. So if you know from your house to McDonald's, you just make a right and a left and you're at McDonald's, that's how a left-brained, more typical reader is reading. That dyslexic reader might go left, then might go right, then might go left. And they get to McDonald's eventually, but it's not as efficient a route. So when we're defining dyslexia, and we use that scientific definition, we understand how the biology works. But when we look at the dyslexic child, we need to look at the gifts that they come with. And I think that what can be challenging for parents is they hear, my child is dyslexic. And what it was like for me was like, oh my goodness, I'm just a reader. How's my kid going to learn to read? And so my journey went back when he was identified in kindergarten, and I had to deal with the fact that I had no idea what to do, and I felt completely helpless, and I didn't know where to look and where to seek. And, I'm grateful now because it got me on a journey to be the tutor I wanted for my own child, to work with kids, to be self-advocates, to talk to teachers, to really help people to understand the true gifts and the power of that wonderful brain that's a dyslexic brain, that's unique unto itself. I think the other really significant thing about dyslexia is it happens on a continuum. So it can be from mild to severe. So I think some people really misunderstand and think everybody is the same. And I think one of the biggest challenges is dyslexia is an invisible, I'm going to use the word disability. And the reason I say disability is because if we want services for our kids, that's what's required. So we have to call them disabled. And it's a disabling condition not being able to read, but we're fortunate that we have the science that has taught us how to teach kids to read. So now with good intervention, with enough time, enough intensity, we can teach most kids how to read text, which I think is what we're seeking. Typically, when we're looking at dyslexia, we see conditions that are comorbid. That's a big word for they sometimes happen at the same time. One of them is attention deficit, which in fact isn't a deficit of attention, but an intensity of attention. And typically parents will say, but my kid can play video games for hours, but sometimes they can't focus on what they need to focus on. So we as educators really need to help kids to understand how to focus their attention. Some kids need to go to medications and things, not all. The other thing is some kids have issues with math. A lot of kids have issues with writing, both the content, because the content seems so big, and for them to get it onto paper in a good structure can be the most challenging thing in the world. The other thing is the physical act of writing can be very challenging for kids. To the extreme, even typing is almost impossible. Fortunately, we're in an age where technology can support that, and we can talk into a cell phone, into a computer, into a lot of devices. The other thing is math. And, that was it for me. I just couldn't do math to save my life. I could not learn those times tables. So when I sit in meetings and teachers demand kids to learn timetables, I'm like, wait a second. You know what? You can say any kid can learn times tables. I still don't know my times tables. And I'm not embarrassed to say it because I can whip out a calculator and figure out anything in a minute. So we can make kids' lives less painful now. And I think that's a great thing. Well, I think if what we're looking at is identifying kids early on, we can look at our kids when they're very, very, very young. Those Biscotti kids, my kid was a Biscotti kid. The sequencing of sounds, and instead of it being spaghetti, it's Biscotti, because the thing we're looking for is that phonemic awareness, that ability to hear individual speech sounds. So if I say to you, what are the sounds in cat? You're going to say to me, k, a, t. A dyslexic kid often can't segment those sounds. They can't hear those individual speech sounds. Again, when they're really young and they're doing the rhyming thing and you're reading the cat in the hat, they don't hear the rhyme. And for us, it's used to it as cat, hat, mat, fat, black, and then you'll hear black. And you go, black, cat, or, cat, pit. Those are couple signs. Slower talking oftentimes. One that's not a good signal, you'll see those letter reversals. And with typical kids, you'll give them the corrections and they'll get them. With a dyslexic kid, they might not get the correction for a huge amount of time. And you really want to watch carefully for those things. As they get older into school, in the lower grades, K3, hopefully there's an assessment in place, Dibbles or an Ames web that shows that phonemic segmenting, that shows the kid's ability to hear those vowel sounds, because it's pretty easy to identify in kindergarten and some people from preschool, the kids that are at risk. And again, we're functioning on a continuum from mild to severe. The more quickly we identify, the more quickly we intervene, the more successful the student's going to be. I think we have this dilemma of diagnosis versus an identification. And often in our schools, we can identify those kids, but the diagnosis is the whole big picture, where we do all the different levels of assessment, where we hear that, where we do the phonemic awareness, where we do the comprehension. We're in some cases, and I like an IQ test because I like to know what the child's processing speed is, because often our kids with dyslexia process very, very slowly. There can be memory issues. If a child has memory issues and processing speed issues, you really work with them in a different way, and you shift your expectation. You give them more time. You deal with them in a way with respect to what their needs are. So a good classroom kindergarten teacher, through some assessment tools that are fairly simple, can say, wow, this kid is at risk. Oftentimes we need to know more. And that's when we do the deeper assessment and we get that diagnosis. And when we say diagnosis, it's done by a professional like a neuropsychologist or a person who's had a lot of experience. Because again, we want to know, is there attention as part of this issue? Is there a problem with the writing? Is the problem more in comprehension? Some kids read very, very quickly and they don't understand a word that's been said. So we really want to make sure that we understand the nuances in order to address the needs of that kid most effectively. The other thing is the better we do it the earlier, the less it's going to take down the road. But still, every transition is going to be a transition that's going to require some support, some tune-up. When you move from 3rd to 4th grade, you're moving from learning to read to reading to learn. And the stakes raise. 5th grade, the stakes raise. You go into middle school, the stakes get really high. So from a parent perspective, because I can speak from both, I want parents to say, okay, well, we're coming on to middle school. We really need to know what's going on here. And I think if we know what to expect, then we just breathe deeply and we say, stakes are going up. I'm going to intensify tutoring, or I'm going to work with the classroom teacher. One of the things that I do with kids, that we've done with kids, we've got a program where we promote advocacy, is as the kids get older, they do a PowerPoint and they come to their teachers and they present those PowerPoints. And the PowerPoint says, this is who I am, this is how I learn, this is what dyslexia is, because oftentimes people don't know what it is. And this is what you can expect from me. These are what my accommodations are. This is how I'm going to be most successful in this learning environment. And that is like astronomical for everyone, because we've taught a teacher a little bit more, but the child is able to say, this is who I am and what I need. So I think that that's a pretty amazing way of educating everyone. Because I've worked with kids for a long time, I've had the opportunity to work with kids from, 1st, 2nd grade. Now my kids are in high school. And the teacher is the most critical element for the kid. Last week, I had a family say, the teacher has told my child that because they have to be able to do their times tables, they're not allowed to use a calculator. and this kid can't get the times tables, and this kid won't use the calculator, so this kid feels ashamed all the time. The biggest complaint children will give you is reading aloud. If a teacher is clued in, there's a way to do oral reading in a class without humiliating a child. There's a way for a kid. I mean, it's just like anything. If you go to a job and you're not very good at what you do, imagine going to work every day knowing you're going to fail. And that teacher is the one that holds the key to the kingdom. And teachers are, teachers do what they do for the love of teaching, but sometimes they don't understand what it's like to feel like a failure every day of your life. And I have kids, I'm working with a family now, and this kid just cries every day. He's barely able to go to school because he feels like such a failure. And instead of like finding a way for him to feel successful, it's exasperating for the teachers. And I understand that, but the kids so suffer. And so, I think it takes a lot of creativity and ingenuity. But the teacher is a critical element to the kid. And frankly, when a teacher goes to teaching, through a teaching certificate, doctors take how many years, and they're in internship programs, and they've got diagnostic skills, and they have this whole big toolbox. And we give this 22-year-old 4 years of education, and then they're working in a classroom. I couldn't do it. I mean, I couldn't teach in a classroom. It's overwhelming to me how many needs there are and how to do it well. And frankly, I would like to see our teachers better prepared. I don't think they're prepared to teach reading. They have minimal coursework. I think that there's long been confusion about how to teach reading. I think the role of the educational institutions needs to shift. I think that then we put our kids into special education where teachers are generalists, and we need specialists to teach reading to dyslexic kids. I know in the state I live in, 59% of the kids in special education are reading challenges. Well, the teachers haven't had any in-depth training to provide the kind of intervention they need. So then you kind of look at the system and you go, well, what are we going to do now? And I think we're starting to kind of catch on. We're starting to see what works. We're starting to get data that says, wow, this is what it takes. I mean, I can tell you in my private practice, I can see kids, the intensive kids, 3-4 times a week. And I mean, we work really hard, and give me a couple, 2-3 years is what it's going to take for a kid that's on the moderate to severe stage. We don't get that in our public schools. I have the gift of one-on-one. We could do small group if a teacher's really good, but that's what else is there if not the teacher? So, I love teachers. I think they're awesome, but I don't think they have all the tools they need to do as good a job as it takes for that really severe kid. So the other kid that I really worry the most about is the kid that's the really gifted kid, that really, really, really bright kid that's also dyslexic. And we call them twice exceptional or 2E. And so what happens is they, number one, oftentimes they're identified very late. So they make it to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade without anybody noticing that they can't read, because they compensate so well. And then they're so bright that the process of that intensive, and it moves very slowly, instruction is really hard for them. And they feel really, 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 really dumb because they know they're really, really, really smart. And if you compound that with attention deficit, you've really got that kind of challenge of like, this kid is moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. They're absolutely brilliant. And how are we going to meet their needs? And so what will happen in a public school environment is, as long as they're within the mean, it's all right. But the reality is their capacity is so far beyond the mean that we're losing some of our best and brightest kids by saying, okay, this is good enough, when in reality their capacity is so far beyond that, and they can achieve so much more. And I think there's a tremendous inequity, because somebody that can pay to get tutoring is going to do better than somebody that's within the system where they say, well, he's achieving at grade level. Well, wait a second, this kid has a huge capacity. If we just give them a little bit more, they're going to do so much better. And, when we think of our Einsteins and we think of our Alexander Graham Bells and we think of our, truly genius Winston Churchill, dyslexic people, we really want to nurture those kids. And I think it can be frustrating for teachers, and it can be really frustrating for parents. And I think this is another place where we really need to look deeply into how we treat those kids, because they're amazing. And think about it. These are kids that are going to come up with solutions that an in-the-box systematic like this kind of person is never going to think of, because their brains are so big and working so hard that they come up with these brilliant ideas. So I get really largely concerned about those kids as well. And I think it's really appropriate not only to address their needs, but to understand who they are as a gifted child, and then let them work to their capacity. The other place where this falls apart is with assessments. And, we can look at the biggies. We can look at ACT and SAT. So we've got this brilliant dyslexic student who gets straight A's and gets average scores on their ACTs and SATs. But if we gave them time and a half, they would score off the charts. And I think that as a society, we're in such a box about achievement and what our standards are that if we don't nurture those people, we're going to lose a generation of solution makers. When my child was identified with dyslexia, I thought, I don't want my child to be labeled. I want to talk about it. Let's talk about the elements, blah, blah, blah. And my situation was one where we did all the wrong things. I mean, we had tutors 3 times a week, and they were the wrong tutors. A year into it, the woman says to me, I don't think I can do anything for your kid. And I'm like, okay. And so I made all the mistakes. And I think that, the more I learned, the more I wanted to share with parents. And so what I say to parents now is, do you mind if I talk to your child about dyslexia? And so what we talk about is faces and brains. And this came from a wonderful teacher, Dr. Barbara Wise, who just I really got it when she said it. And we talk about, you have brown eyes, I have blue eyes. I have wrinkly skin, your skin has no wrinkles. And we talk a lot about that. And then we talk about brains. And we talk about how our brains are kind of the same size. They're about this big. And that every brain is as different as every face. And that our unique, wonderful brain processes language differently. And that everybody else has something that's different about them, and our brains are different too. And I talk a lot about strengths, and I talk to them about how we want to get this part of the brain more active because it'll make us more effective readers, but that it's invisible. And that then we talk about gifts, because I think that the most important thing that parents, educators, and kids can know is that everyone has challenges and everyone has gifts. And that even though it was really easy for you to ride a bicycle, you remember your friend down the street that couldn't do that. And that, reading might be the hardest thing for you to ever learn how to do, but you'll get there. And I think that the parent's job is to build on the child's strengths, period. What are they good at? What do they enjoy? I personally believe that educators should do the teaching. Parents reading aloud to kids is profound for them. I was at a conference this weekend, and so many people were talking about their most glorious moments. And the younger they are, the easier it is to do that. But that I would not make a big deal about the dyslexia. I think dyslexia is amazing. I think dyslexic people are the most fun people in the world because they have such cool ways of looking at things, and they're creative and they're inventive, and whether they're skilled at science or they're skilled at math or they're skilled at art or they're skilled at whatever, there's so many gifts that they bring. And I think that the less stressed we are, the less stressed they are. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is typically we have a genetic link. And oftentimes it's hard when that child is identified with dyslexia that parent's issues come up. And, for me, I didn't even know. I mean, I'm a reader. It was math for me. I could not do math. And, I didn't even realize any of this until I learned about this from my son. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I wasn't really dumb. I really couldn't get it. Every summer doing the math program, I just didn't get it. And a lot of the comprehension issues I had, and my learning style was so unique because I ask 90 million questions. Well, that's how I learn. I don't necessarily learn reading books. I can't read directions. It doesn't work for me. And yet I read. I read for fun. So I think some of it, I think the biggest pieces is to really build on strengths, to really accept that child for who they are, where they are, and find ways in which to support them that empower them. You don't want to do it for them, but you can help to do it with them. If it's a child that doesn't want to work with you, find somebody else to help them. And if there's a way that they can get some sort of a mentor, someone that they can talk to and really deal with, the issues that are their issues, that's an awesome thing. I think the most difficult thing for me is that I can't fix it for my kid. I couldn't fix it in the school system. I couldn't fix it in his tutoring. I couldn't fix it. And really, I remember once we were doing something and all of a sudden he was crying. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, well, Dad's gone. And I thought to myself, well, Dad usually leaves for a week. He's gone. He'll be back in the morning. And it was kind of like, I was the place where he took everything out. I got yelled at, screamed at. I got doors slammed in my face, and I could never figure out what was really mine and what was the frustration of the day at school. Because the reality is when you consider how much these kids put out, and I think one of the biggest things that teachers don't get is that, a typical kid has, say that the homework load is an hour. That homework load for my kid is 3 hours. That classroom load for my kid, I always thought that everybody processed the way I did. And so I have to listen and I have to think about it and I have to turn it into a picture. And then if I'm going to communicate with you, I have to turn that picture into words. I thought everybody on the planet did that. What I discovered is that I do that. So here are these kids, and a lot of them do that. They have to really work hard to get what's being communicated into something that they understand, and then they have to produce product, and in some cases, they have to talk out loud. So by the time they get home, they are fried. So then they get what would be an hour's worth of homework that then takes them 3 hours, and they're exhausted. It's like being jet lagged all the time. Your body is just not right because you're putting out so much energy. And the only way you can remediate that is by reducing the homework load. But oftentimes teachers don't really believe parents, or they don't get that that's really the truth. If you get a teacher that's been through it as a parent, they get it. But I think it's really hard for them to understand when my kid comes home, he needs to punch a punching bag, ride his bike, shoot a basket, swim, put on music, draw a picture, because he's toast. And I think it's really hard for other people to understand that. My other peeve is I remember a lady saying to me, when my kid was born, we read in utero, and then we read every single night. And I truly wanted to punch her in the face and say, we just, hang out in front of the TV and, I don't know what you think I did for the first, 5 years of my kid's life. But this is a learning disability. This is a language-based learning disability. It's been proven by science. And I don't know why there's still a question. And so, even with educators who've been in the business forever, they just don't completely understand that this is a learning disability. This is a challenge. This is something that takes the life out of kids. And so I guess if I were to say something to a teacher, I would say, please breathe deeply with me and understand that I'm not out of my mind, but really, truly, when my kid comes home, he is done. He is toast. She is toast. And let's come up with some strategies and solutions so that we can re-energize this child. And maybe that's going to be an alternative way of doing an assignment. Maybe it's going to be dictating to me because, frankly, if in my tutor hat, I want kids to be writers. And I take that dictation because when they dictate it to me, they're writing. Maybe it's going to be a book on tape or a book through Bookshare or one of the organizations, Reading Ally. Let them read it by listening. Let them track with their fingers so that they can see the words. Because what will start to happen is they'll start to see themselves as readers and writers. But if we're punishing those kids and not letting them take that breath to be okay, we're impacting them for the rest of their lives. So how do we make a kid into a reader? Do we up the demand? Another one of my pet peeves is I think no matter where a kid reads, they should have access to text at grade level, period, no matter what. And at this point in time, there's no reason why a 7th grader reading at a 3rd grade level can't be getting books on tape, can't be getting any handout that a teacher gives run through a computer so that they can hear it. Because that's another place. How would you feel if you, again, were in a situation where you were failing on a daily basis? So I think we owe it to our kids to work as teams, parents, educators, administrators, and not only solve the problem, but keep the esteem in place.